connected, given clear messages either to execute on or pass on. It was the nerve center that linked to nerve centers in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and later Lusaka. Even under banning orders, it still operated effectively as a communication hub. Some of the most regular visitors to our home included Yunus Muhammad, Yusuf Wauda, Vish Supasad, Vidhu Vedalanka, the Ram Gobind family, George Supasad, Farooq Mir, Bamba and Dolly Pillay, Swami Gaundan, Archie Gumede, Virgil Bonham, Krish Govinda, Roy Padyachi, Paul and Ursula David, Selina, Anesh, Maggie, Charm, Deepak Oteps, Nadi and Prissy Jinabai, Daya Pillay, Jerry and Zubi Kuvadia, and Spider Jagannath, Alfantina and Rasheen, to name a few. These are activists who collectively made things happen, and the community that supported my dad, our family and each other through the tyranny of the apartheid state. Thanks to all of these courageous souls, I had many godmothers and godfathers, many of whom I am still very close to today. A story that is often told and which speaks to the type of relationships that existed at the time is the process of selecting a name for me. I was without a name for a few months when I was born, and it was put to a group of activists to democratically select a name for me. Yunus Muhammad, Jerry, and Zubi named me Anisa, which means a pleasant companion. My dad then built on this and named me Anisha, meaning a new dawn or without darkness. I'm still known and saved on Auntie Zubi's phone as Anisa to this day. The activity at our flat in Prince Edward Street brought significant attention from the security establishment. As a child, I remember raids in the early hours of the morning, tapped telephones, and constant monitoring of our household. During my years as a baby and a toddler, my mother would hide secret documents in my nappy, and when the security branch police came to raid the house, she would pass me to my aunt, who would then take away the documents and hide them. In 1977, when my dad was under a banning order, the police raided our home. They spotted a file on the top shelf labeled ANC. They visibly showed excitement, only to discover the file contained my mother's notes from her nursing degree, and ANC referred to antenatal clinics. Whenever there was a big campaign or a new release from Robben Island, our home was abuzz with planning, sending out activists to carry out key tasks, and always a place to grab a bite to eat. My aunt, my second mother, my ba, always ensured there was a delicious home-cooked meal to feed the many activists that popped in and out of our house. Her nurturing, motherly nature offered a place of comfort to many of the activists. My uncle, my dad senior by 12 years, and my second dad worked tirelessly in the sari shop, Bangalore Sari House, below the flat to provide for the family. He and my mom were the only two breadwinners at the time. Together they supported and largely supported our family and my dad's career as an activist. One of my earliest memories was the security branch police coming to take my father away to detention when I was 4 years old. My father was planning Griffiths and Tenge's funeral at the time, and the cops found pamphlets in our home. As they were taking my father away to detention, he told me to look at the faces of the security branch police and remember these men who were taking my father away. These men, he said, were working against the liberation of this country, and he taught me to call them oinks, meaning pigs. When I was 6 years old, my father was again detained. We had heard through an inside contact that he was at CR SWAT prison. At the time, we had one of those telephones with the circular dial. Unbeknown to the adults in the house, I called CR SWAT. I asked to speak to the oinks, and I told them that I wanted them to bring my daddy home. To this day, no one understands how I found the number, nor how I knew to use the telephone at the time. But the innocence of a child still didn't deter the oinks. The support provided by the community around us is what made the struggle years so rich and colorful for me. Brave people who would sacrifice everything they had in the name of the liberation struggle. Audrey and Max Coleman started the Detainees Parents Support Committee. They stood up to the apartheid security branch by organizing families of detainees and providing financial and other support where they could. The launch of the DPSC was held at St. Anthony's Church in Durban. I was 6 years old and was kept up until midnight to light the inaugural candle. As midnight struck and the candle was lit, there was a raid on the church. The police fired tear gas and brutally attacked the attendees. My mother hid me on the floor of the back seat of the car and covered me with her jacket. When it was all over, we emerged stronger and more resilient. My father's baby sister, Shanta, played a pivotal role in his life. They are 15 months apart and remained close until his dying day. She was his fiercest supporter and protector. She endured endless pressure from her family and risked her life on many occasions to protect her brother. On one occasion, we had found out that my father had been detained and was in the hospital because of an eye infection. My mother and aunt went to visit the hospital. The ward that my father was in was guarded by the police, so there was no way of seeing him. But my aunt innovatively took off her gold bangle and rolled it into the ward. She put down my cousin Hema, who was just a few months younger than a year, on the floor to crawl after the bangle. My aunt then bravely ran after Hema, saw my father, and managed to get a few secret messages to pass on. Growing up, my father tried his best to give me a small semblance of what a normal childhood would look like whenever he could. He would surprise me at the back door of a ballet concert with flowers, or pop into school for a 5-minute visit during break. My cousin Deepa fondly remembers a weekend we spent with my dad at Auntie Lali and Uncle Pat's home in Hillcrest. My father, my cousin Kamal, Deepa, and I spent the weekend swimming, watching movies, and eating loads of ice cream. This was the only holiday we spent together. During his underground days, visits with my father included disguises, which were mostly crazy wigs, clandestine swapping of cars, and eventually a milkshake at the Tropicana restaurant in Albert Park. Non-whites were not allowed to enter the restaurant, but you could be served in your car. Most of the time with my father was spent at mass meetings, at underground meetings, toy-toying on the streets of Durban, and fleeting glances in a police station or a courtroom. The energy at the ANC memorial held last night at Kendra Hall felt like one of those mass meetings. My father would have loved it. It was kids like Kaylin, which was Alfantina Karim's son, Anushka, my lifelong friend and sister, and the older generation of kids, the Ram Gobins, the Davids, the Pillais, and I. We were the kids that provided a refreshing distraction to the serious revolutionary rhetoric of the day. Being a fly on the wall of these endless meetings provided amazing insight into the struggle, how it was strategized, and the heated debates that existed. But little did I know the impact of what was taking place at the time. One such heated and divisive debate was in the 80s and at our Prince Edward Street apartment. It was whether to participate in the tricameral elections in 1984, whether to boycott or work in the system to bring it down. The decision to boycott and create the UDF were probably the most significant decisions of that period. The rest, as they say, is history. During Operation Vula, we didn't know where my father was for months. He was in a prison in Bethlehem, but on one fateful day, the security branch police had brought him to Durban and taken him to the wheel in Point Road to get themselves a meal at Wimpy. My father managed to tug on the emotional strings of one of the cops and explained that it was my birthday. He then asked them to please allow him to buy his daughter a birthday card and arranged for it to be thrown over the wall at our home. It was at this point that we knew that he was alive. So even as an activist, he still took time to be a father. My aunt one day hurriedly took my cousins and I out of school. We had no idea why or where we were going. We got to the Durban Magistrates Court, and it was the Operation Vula trial. We were excited that we were going to see my father after many, many months. We were not allowed to have any personal time with him, but as he walked up the stairs, he stroked my hand. And as he sat in the dock waiting, he kept looking back at me and smiling to check if I was okay. When they took him away, I had to be restrained by my aunt and others. I wanted to run after my father, and I couldn't accept that he wasn't coming home with us. When Madiba was released from Robben Island, he came to visit the Operation Vula detainees' families at the University of Durban, Westville. I was 14 years old then. Madiba looked at me and said, I got my looks from my beautiful mother and my handsome grandfather, with whom he had spent 16 years on Robben Island. He put me on his lap and spoke to me about the great sacrifices my father was making for the country and for the sake of future generations. His praise for Pravin provided great comfort to me. During CODESA, there was a term that a political party wanted to negotiate. My father refused to agree to it. One day I was going to see my father, and my uncle received a call saying that if Pravin didn't agree to this term, they would kidnap me and hurt me. For months after, I was locked up for my protection, but this did not stop my father. He moved from activist to expert negotiator and played a crucial role in steering South Africa to democracy. In 1991, my father married Vanita Raju, and together they made a formidable pair to face the challenges that came in the years to follow. He became part of the Raju family. In 1992, his baby Priyesha was born. I watched him as he became the doting, devoted father to Priyesha, and he was just so proud of her. To the Raju family, thank you for all you have done for my father, for the many sacrifices you have made, and for all the cherished memories you shared with him. He had a special place in his heart for each and every one of you, and I thank you for showering him with so much love. To his surrogate sons, James, Viraj, Yaska, he loved you all. To James, thank you for taking such good care of my dad. I call you a blessing, and you really are. From 1994, I watched my father become a dedicated, hardworking civil servant. He worked in the local government sector and was instrumental in drafting our constitution. He worked tirelessly to realize the vision of a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. He worked to restore truth to politics, to repair the harms of inequality, and to move towards social and economic justice. He fiercely defended the democracy he fought so hard for. What people don't understand, and what we all need to be educated about, is that the period between 2009 and 2018 can only be remembered as a period in which most state institutions were ruined and pillaged. Technocrats were removed forcefully, whistleblowers were silenced, and all maintenance spend stolen. That is what the new government inherited in 2018, an almost failed state. To blame my father for the dysfunctioning of state-owned enterprises is both ignorant and factually incorrect. He was determined to protect the jobs at SAA, Transnet, Eskom, Denel, and he spoke endlessly of protecting families from further hardship. He did what he could and worked furiously to protect our institutions and to lay a solid foundation for future generations. He faced brutal attacks during these years. Our personal safety was compromised, smear campaigns were designed by Bell Pottinger, bank accounts in Canada were created, and we were discredited as a family. All of this ultimately led to many comrades and friends distancing themselves from my father and our family. Despite this, he remained unshaken and more determined than ever. The fence sitters that didn't want to take a stand now stand on platforms and loudly sing his praises, but the courage to connect the dots and stand for change came too late. He repeatedly said, "Our souls are not for sale, and our country is not for sale." My father's integrity was never compromised. I watched in awe as he took on the fight against corruption. After a series of attacks, I asked him one day how he could so steadfastly move forward with such precise focus. He told me to never let the noise disturb the fight to meet the end objective, to end corruption. After the 27 questions, the arrest warrants, the unintelligent intelligence report, and being so gravely disappointed by his own comrades, I asked him if he was able to sleep. His message to me was, "I won't allow these thugs to steal my precious sleep. I sleep with a clear conscience of doing nothing wrong." On Tuesday, when my father found out his condition was terminal, I once again watched his courageous spirit confront death. He methodically and systematically explained what he wanted as his last wishes. Many of his family and lifelong comrades visited him that day. His message to them was simple: take care of you and your families. Our work is not done, and the fight to protect the needy and uplift the poor must continue. It takes more than just an individual to be a great man like my father, to be an activist and a freedom fighter. It takes a support structure and a strong community. My father had this community in the ANC, but he also had this community in his family and comrades. I would like to thank all of you for being by our side during this difficult time. To Momo, Adrian, Vidhu, Teps, Derek, Trish, Ranjani, Nishan, Nava, Kanti, Fuad, Intabi, Sanjay, Ashwin, and many others. To Mr. President for being an amazing support structure to my dad and a brother to him. We appreciate you and we are eternally grateful. You are all so loved by my dad. It is a tough road to renewal. There's no easy walk to freedom. The essence of change is struggle, in a positive sense. What we need is a social and political coalition for renewal and change, one in which egos and individualism must be set aside for the great cause of saving a wonderful movement. My father was proud of what he helped build, but he was distraught at the rise in African nationalism, the uncaring and selfish acts of the greedy, the conspicuous consumption and unprincipled behavior by career politicians. But what we have witnessed over the past week is South Africans bonding around a common purpose, coming together to mourn the loss of one of our heroes. His heroism is reflected not only in his sacrifices from this country, but from the respect he commanded from all corners of the globe. The patriotism and social cohesion displayed over the past week is what would have made my father proud, and this is what he strived for during his life. Let us build, let us stand up and fight for this beautiful country which has so much opportunity. Let us protect what we have for future generations, and let us build a nation that will make Pravin proud. Not bury our heads in the sand, not to lose hope, and not to feel powerless, but to recognize the immense strength that lies in our hands as a diverse, talented, and vibrant family of South Africa. Let us complete his unfinished work to build a stronger, more unified, more inclusive, great nation of South Africans. I end with one of his favorite quotes by Nelson Mandela. I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed towards the sun, one's feet moving forward. There are many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays death and defeat. Today we mourn the dead, tomorrow we live for them. Hamakashle, Dad. Until we meet again, I love you.
Doesn't fall far from the tree, and we are seeing it. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Anisha. Thank you very much, darling. Let me now call Priyesha Gordhan to speak to us.
Good afternoon. I've inherited a lot from my dad, as evidenced by the cheeks and the double chin, but unfortunately an aptitude for public speaking is not one of them, so please bear with me. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance today in honor of my father, and thank you, Mr. President, for affording him this honor. You have by now heard many things about my father as a pharmacist, a commissioner, a minister, an activist, a freedom fighter, a public servant, and a CODESA chair, a hero to the country and to the movement. But for me, there's a certain cognitive dissonance in my head about who Pravin Gordhan is, a stoic leader, formidable in his fortitude and intellectualism in public spheres, but at the end of the day, a simple, humble, and compassionate man, just my dad. The dad who massaged my head for hours to alleviate my migraines, the dad who never erased my drawings on his whiteboard at work, instead writing around them. The dad who was at every award ceremony and special event, no matter what public engagements he had. And the dad who pushed me to understand dialectical materialism when all I wanted was to scroll on my phone. And he was the best father I could have ever wished or hoped for, as cliche as that sounds. I grew up with my father in a different time. I don't have struggle stories, and I was very privileged to be with him at a time where he could be home more often with his family, and I wanted to give you a little glimpse of what that was like. My father loved spy movies and romantic comedies. He supported Liverpool, but always made a point to support the underdog in any competition. He could not tolerate the slamming of doors in the house or the car doors because it brought him back to the trauma of being in detention and the cell being slammed shut by the security police. His favorite art piece was a sculpture named The Thinker. After his detentions, he could stomach almost any food, and he wasn't fussy, except for peanut butter. My father only had his first taste of alcohol after South Africa achieved its democracy in 1994. He made this choice so that he would never find himself inebriated and vulnerable and possibly at risk of giving up information. He was incredibly disciplined. My father loved stationery and notebooks and has created quite the collection over the past few years, and one of our favorite pastimes was window shopping in an art shop. My father was present in almost every facet of my life, and he is deeply embedded in everything that I am. One of my favorite anecdotes is on a particular casualty shift that ended at 7:30, a time that I was still firmly in denial about my deteriorating eyesight, and so I never wore glasses. I was walking back to the main casualty area after our handover round. I then noticed very blurrily that a crowd had suddenly formed just after the nurses' station. My initial instinct was, oh no, what has happened now? As I cautiously approached, I noticed that the patients were surrounding someone. As I got closer and my visual acuity improved, I realized that it was my father in the middle of that crowd. He had come to collect me from work after my shift and had come into the casualty to look for me as I had taken longer than usual to come out. The crowd were actually patients excitedly surrounding him in an attempt to greet him. In that moment, I saw someone who inspired and brought joy, even to those who were sick, in pain, and scared. What a privilege to be that person, and an even greater privilege to be associated with them. I realized the honor I had as his daughter, and what a profound and beautiful honor it is. Of course, he then kept me at work longer after my tiring shift, as he spoke to clerks and triage staff trying to optimize the waiting time at the hospital. This is just one of many stories that I have, and since then I have been honored to witness more and more of these types of interactions. Usually with ordinary South Africans on the ground, those interactions gave him the most peace and confirmation that he was doing right by this country. With regards to my parents, the most resilient and loving team, I've often referred to them as soulmates, but now I think that it is more than that. I firmly believe that they are twin flames, one soul in two bodies, activists, comrades, and life partners, and it has been a blessing and a gift to bear witness to their remarkable relationship. To see the simplicity and humility of their bond, their unwavering devotion to each other. True partners, a relationship built on mutual respect, trust, and unconditional love. My father rarely spoke about my mother in public, partly to protect us from the public eye, but also because he would often start to cry when he spoke of her. He always taught me to constantly raise the bar, but in this case, they've already set the bar extremely high. He always used the term that we serve at the pleasure of the president, but I always added the qualification and Vanitha. My father was a party man and a disciplined and dedicated cater of the movement, fiercely devoted to his country and its people. He fervently believed that the renewal and revitalization of the ANC was possible. One of my dad's favorite philosophers and writers was Antonio Gramsci, and Gramsci once said, I hate the indifferent. I believe that living means taking sides. Indifference and apathy are parasitism, perversion, not life. That is why I hate the indifferent. South Africans, please continue to connect the dots. Don't be fooled by the convincing tones of populist rhetoric. Continue my father's legacy, a life dedicated and devoted to the betterment of this country and its people. He once said, the public should mobilize. Fragmented voices don't have the weight it requires. Masses make history, not individuals. The best honor that you can give him is to continue the fight for non-racialism and social justice. He was not a religious man, but he believed that the meek shall inherit the earth. It is difficult for me as a medical person that I was unable to save my father, and it is something that I will have to deal with in the years ahead. From his teachings and his influence, I am deeply committed to our public healthcare system, and hopefully I can make a difference to other people and their families. Dad, all I can say is thank you. Thank you for this extraordinary life, for loving me so immensely and being so proud of me. I will miss you every day of my life, but I know our bond transcends physical boundaries. I will spend the rest of my life trying to live every day to make you proud. If I achieve anything good or great in this life, it will be because I've had you as my father and my lodestar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priyesha. We've learned from the two daughters, and it's very enriching to know from those who are closest to you who you are. Allow me to ask His Excellency the President to come and give a eulogy. This.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Program Director, my dear sister Vanita, dearest Anisha and Priyesha, and the extended Gordhan family, the acting Premier of our province, KwaZulu-Natal, ministers and deputy ministers here present, members of the judiciary, the leadership of the South African National Defence Force and the South African Police Service, the leadership of the African National Congress, Pravin Gordhan's party, as led by the Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, the leadership of the alliance partners, COSATU and the SACP, and indeed the leadership of other political parties that are here present, religious leaders, traditional leaders, and leaders of various community-based organizations, and comrades and friends. It was the poet Rabindranath Tagore who said, "We come nearest to the great when we are great in humility." Today, we bid farewell to a humble servant of our people, Pravin Gordhan. For all his achievements, despite his immense contribution to our country and to its people, Pravin was at all times a humble human being and activist. It was his humility as a person and as a leader that made him a great human being. It was his unwavering belief that a political activist must serve no other cause than the cause of freedom that made PG so exceptional. It is that which makes great all true servants of our people who are leaders. Leaders who accept the responsibility to lead with humility, with commitment, and with courage. They are leaders who also admit themselves and submit themselves to being led. These are leaders who speak up when they must, but who also listen to the voices of our people attentively. These are the leaders who are magnanimous in victory and gracious in defeat. Such leaders are people who stand up for what is right, even at great personal cost to themselves. That is who Pravin was. Pravin joined the struggle at a young age, as we have heard. He became active in the Natal Indian Congress and the South African Communist Party. The origins of his activism in student and civic politics was to define his political perspective and attitude. Even as a member of parliament, even as a minister, at his essence, PG remained a grassroots activist who was well versed in mobilization, in organizing people. He was one of those rare people who knew what the real cost of struggle was. His activism earned him arrests, beatings, and detentions. He knew the perils of underground work. As an operative of Operation Vula, he was interrogated, tortured, and thrown into solitary confinement, and then tried. Yet, whenever called upon, he stepped forward to always serve. PG is remembered as a key figure in the formation of the United Democratic Front. He's also remembered as a leader of the South African Communist Party structures and the African National Congress, his political home. He became known as a seasoned negotiator and astute tactician. I know this from the front seat row as I worked with him very closely during negotiations. He played an important role in our country's peaceful transition to democracy, contributing positively at all times, without sacrificing any of his movement's principles. He was one of the architects in the end of our democratic constitution both at a political level and at an organizing level, running the administration as well of the whole process. As a pharmacist, as a dedicated revolutionary, he may not have seemed the best choice to lead the South African Revenue Service. Because how do you mix tax and pharmaceuticals? But in him we found an intelligent person who was steeped in enterprise and diligence that made him the perfect person to build one of the most important and effective institutions of our young democracy. It was these attributes that made him the right person to be appointed also the Minister of Finance at a time of great difficulty and challenge for our country during a global economic crisis. In every task that he was given and in every portfolio he occupied, he was methodical and industrious. He understood the value of the work that he had been given. He understood that efficient revenue collection was essential for the fundamental transformation of our society. He understood also that careful management of public finances was vital for the education of our children and the health of our population. He knew that if the lives of the poor were ever to be improved, municipalities needed to work and to work well. He also knew that if unemployed South Africans were to find work, the country's trains needed to run and the ports needed to function properly. He knew that the power stations of Eskom needed to produce enough electricity to drive a thriving economy. Always an activist, he did the work that needed to be done. And as an activist, he's a person who stood firm on principle and never sacrificed what he believed in. During one of the most painful chapters in our democratic history, as the state was being looted by the powerful and the connected, he chose to resist. Using all means at his disposal, he worked to thwart the capture of the state. Drawing on the substantial moral stature that he had, he refused to be silenced. He was prepared to confront those who had once been his own comrades, whom he had once looked up to as leaders, but who had abandoned the cause of our people. As many others looked away, his revolutionary consciousness demanded no less of him than to speak out, and speak out he did. For him, it was no different to when he joined the struggle against apartheid. It was a choice between what was right and what was wrong. It was a choice between standing with the people or standing against the people. There was never any doubt where Pravin Gordhan stood. What gave him strength and encouragement was that he was not alone. Among his comrades, among activists, among civic leaders, among public servants, among broader society, was a growing movement against state capture. In ways that history has yet to fully record, Pravin Gordhan played a pivotal role in giving form and effect, yes, to the voices and to the movement that rose against state capture. This earned him the ire of the enablers of state capture. They hated him. They wanted to see him gone. It earned him the wrath of those more interested in political expediency than in undoing the great damage and harm that state capture had done. PG endured, as we have heard, vicious personal attacks. These attacks were dishonest. They were disingenuous. They were condescending, and they were patronizing as well. Many of these attacks were also racist. And they were directed at one of our country's foremost champions of non-racialism. These attacks did nothing to diminish PG's standing amongst many South Africans. Instead, they exposed the moral bankruptcy of those who chose to target him and also to target his family. His family suffered immensely from the attacks that were leveled against them. It was shameful then, and it remains shameful even today. Let it never be that in the robust festival of ideas and vibrant public space that is the hallmark of our democracy, that we stoop so low to slander and be so dismissive of people who stand for the truth. Let it never be that in trying to portray ourselves as the liberators, that we come to sound like the oppressor. It takes a person of true mettle to withstand the onslaught that Pravin was subjected to. I had the privilege of working alongside him for many years during the struggle against apartheid at CODESA and in the Constitutional Assembly, in the ANC and in government. I will remember him fondly for having a very collaborative spirit, of always being positive. I will remember him for his tact, for his strategic thinking, especially also if one disagreed with him. I will remember him standing firm on principle, and I will miss his incisive contributions in cabinet and in many other meetings in our party, the ANC. And I will miss our many discussions over many hours at my home, in offices, on the telephone, conversations that would go late into the night. I valued his frankness and his forthrightness on many issues. He was one of those who, as one engaged with, was always meticulous in his thinking, always well prepared for any topic that one engaged him on. And I respected his opinions, and I appreciate that he always afforded me the same courtesy. He was my comrade, he was also my colleague, and he was a very good friend. There are a great many lessons one can draw from his life and from his political activism. The most fitting tribute we can pay Pravin is to reflect on our own actions, to consider what we can and should each do to serve our people better and our country better, to reflect on what it means to be an activist, for he was the quintessential activist, to consider if we are prepared to weather the great storms that so often confront acts of courage and integrity. These are the issues upon which we must indeed all reflect as we bid farewell to this great son of our country. It is in times of difficulty that moral courage is valued most. It is at times of renewal and rebuilding that activism is most needed. And this is the time of renewal and rebuilding. As we strive to rebuild our country, as the government of national unity, we will rely on men and women of integrity, men and women of honor and courage to account and to help shepherd our country in a new era and its people. Pravin Gordhan's spear has fallen, and it is now up to us to pick it up and take our country forward. I'd like to say to the Gordhan family, the nation shares your sorrow at the loss of a husband, a father, a brother, a cousin, and an uncle. I'd like to thank you for affording me the opportunity to talk to him a few days before he departed from this world. He was lucid as I spoke to him on Tuesday after Anisha called me. I happened to be in Cape Town, and she said, if you'd like to see him, come see him because he'll be gone soon. I couldn't be in Johannesburg, but I'm glad that you allowed me the opportunity to come and spend his last hours with him. And in a sense, I think he waited for me to come and see him before he departed. It is not lost on any of us that his dedication to our country demanded great personal sacrifice from you as a family. And to the friends and comrades and compatriots of our beloved departed comrade, be comforted in the knowledge that his legacy continues to guide our every effort to build a free, just, and equal South Africa. What Pravin dedicated his life to is what we will continue doing so that we do not let him down. I leave you with the words from Rabindranath Tagore once again, when he said, "Give me the strength lightly to bear my joys and sorrows. Give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. Give me the strength never to disown the poor or bend my knees before insolent might. Give me the strength to raise my mind high above daily trifles, and give me the strength to surrender my strength to thy will with love." Comrade Pravin, you were all of these things. Yours was a life fruitful in service. You bore your sorrows with strength and dignity. You stood up for the poor, and you never disowned them. You would not bend your knee before injustice. You would not bend your knee before those who were stealing from the poor. Where many tried to bring you down with their insults, your feet remained firmly on the high ground. And now you have surrendered your strength to the will of your Creator. You were a much admired, much respected, and much loved comrade. You were a much loved colleague and a friend. Hamba kahle.
Lizali sidinga lakho, Thixo Nkosi yenyaniso, zonke inhlanga zonke izizwe mazizuze usizo.